Where the Norwegian vaccine trial stops, a new one begins.
The MeNZB vaccination caused her immune system to crash.
The Norwegian meningitis vaccine, which had never been introduced in Norway, was instead exported to the other side of the world. The nature and makeup of the population of New Zealand is not unlike that of Norway. Here too, the dangerous meningococcal B bacteria has spread fear and grief. But in 2001, help arrived from Norway.
We knew that the Norwegian parent vaccine was safe, and we believed it could be effective in the New Zealand situation.
Using the same technique and methods as in the 80s, scientists at the Norwegian Institute of Public Health tailor-made a vaccine for New Zealand. The multinational pharmaceutical company Chiron got the rights for mass production and to commercialize the vaccine. The Norwegian Institute of Public Health has so far received about 8.5 million Norwegian kroner for its work. Normally, a vaccine needs to go through various tests in several phases before its approval for use in the general population. But this vaccine was tested in record time. Amongst others, the so-called Phase 3 trial was dropped. Rare side effects are often not discovered before a broader Phase 3 trial. Instead of doing a separate broad trial, the data on safety and effectiveness were transferred from the Norwegian vaccine to the New Zealand one.
A Phase 3 trial would have delayed getting such a vaccine to New Zealand kids who were suffering and being maimed and dying from meningococcal disease.
I'll never forget that last smile. A few hours later, she passed away.
All under 20-year-olds should complete their vaccinations now. It's free, so call your local doctor or nurse today.
Parliamentary member in New Zealand, Sue Kedgley, was angered by the way the vaccine was introduced in the country.
We were told that basically the reason we didn't need stage 3 clinical trials here in New Zealand was because the vaccine had been tested and indeed administered to the people of Norway, and that proved that it was safe and effective. So it was constantly held up as the reason why we should have no concerns and why it was safe and effective.
The Norwegian vaccine was thus used as a guarantee for the safety and effectiveness of the New Zealand vaccine. The guarantor to the New Zealand population was the Norwegian Institute of Public Health.
They are very similar, and because they are formulated and produced in the same way, we think we can use the data from each of the vaccines for the other vaccine.
How confident are you about that?
Well, we are quite confident about that, yes.
But the New Zealand vaccine is not quite the same as the Norwegian. It is derived from another strain of the meningococcal B bacteria, and changes had to be made to develop the new vaccine. This means that the New Zealand vaccine could also have other side effects from the Norwegian.
The whole rollout of the vaccine was basically one gigantic experiment.
Do you have no concern about the way you have guaranteed this vaccine in New Zealand?
I believe we can fully answer for our actions in New Zealand. As I said, the trials and evaluations that have been done there are the responsibility of the New Zealand authorities. As far as I know about what's been done, I believe it seems responsible, but of course I don't know all the details.
No, you don't know all the details, but you know it well enough to tell the population that this is a good vaccine.
On the basis of what we know from here, I believe so.
Because of the missing data on the effectiveness and safety of the vaccine, it has not been formally approved in New Zealand. Mass vaccination of 1.1 million New Zealand children was started with a temporary approval.
A 9-month-old baby boy is the first infant to be immunised with a new vaccine to stop children dying from meningococcal disease.
After having worked as a risk analyst for the New Zealand Department of Health, Ron Law is now one of the vaccination programme's most outspoken critics.
The director of the vaccine program referred to it as the vaccine as a calculated gamble. They didn't know if it would work. They had no evidence that it would work. They hoped it would work. But when you inject an unknown into 1 million healthy children, that's a big ask.
What did the Norwegian health authorities know about side effects when their vaccine was exported to New Zealand? The Norwegian Institute of Public Health sold its rights to the vaccine after Jenny Mathilde Ingebrigtsen had received compensation for her vaccine injury in 1996. And they proclaimed the vaccine's excellence after Annelise Jonsen's compensation was paid out in 2003.
I despair that they, in a way, advertised the vaccine after so many ugly things earlier. Shows such a lack of respect.
Ingeborg Åberge from the Norwegian Institute of Public Health is quoted in several articles in the New Zealand Medical Journal saying that 360,000 doses of the Norwegian parent vaccine have been administered, with no serious adverse events attributable to the vaccine occurring.
We have told the New Zealand authorities everything we know.
But what does New Zealand's population say?
On the TV programme, which was a brief case with an interview like this one, we answered the questions and confirmed that we believe this vaccine to be safe. That's what the New Zealand population has been told.
And you feel sure that this was correct?
Yes, we do.
That means that they have completely ignored what professionals, experts in this country, have said.
Would you have dared guarantee for the vaccine in that way?
No. I wouldn't have included my grandchildren either.
But the Norwegian Institute of Public Health doesn't hesitate to recommend the vaccine to New Zealand parents.
If we had had an epidemic with a New Zealand-like strain, I would have given that vaccine to my children.
Without hesitation?
Yes, without hesitation.
What is the Institute of Public Health saying here? The vaccine was never tested on children in Norway. Therefore, there is no data on small children from Norway that could be transferred to New Zealand.
First of all, the vaccine isn't safe. There have been several serious cases. Secondly, to say that the vaccine is effective is overselling it. Thirdly, it is a breach of international protocol for research ethics to start treating small children in New Zealand with a vaccine that has been tested on a totally different group of people, namely school children. And that is, to put it mildly, subjecting hundreds of thousands of small children to a gigantic experiment.
But you wouldn't hesitate to give your children a vaccine that hasn't been tested properly on children?
I believe that it has been tested sufficiently on children, and that I would consider it safe.
What is sufficient testing to give a vaccine to small children?
It would depend from case to case, so I can't give you a general answer.
Norwegian officials go on New Zealand TV stating there's no safety problem with this vaccine, I'd give it to my own kids, knowing all these concerns. Why would they tell the people things like that? It's immoral.